wish for, buddy.
Dangerous Dan.
It's been a little while. Who knows what's going to come out of my mouth tomorrow morning, but thanks for the chance. You know, I get to shake the dust off the headphones and let her rip for a couple hours and get everybody excited for Super Bowl 51 because nobody is. I've heard almost no buzz all week for this game on Sunday.
I have, since I realized that you were going to be here on Friday, I have just not talked about it, basically, and I know that you're going to hit it on Friday. Part of it is that what local, Chicago, Northwest Indiana, what kind of attraction do you have to Atlanta or to New England? You know what I mean? It's just, it's not close. We don't have a lot of local players who have played for the Bears and that have gone there.
Right.
You just don't have a connection right now.
Yeah, and one of the former Bears who is going to be playing in this game Sunday is a reminder from a terrible era, and that's Shea McClellan, who it seems like Bill Belichick found a way to use him even though they couldn't get anything to get him a varsity letter while he was here in town. I guess if you want to call Rob Ninkovich local, the Patriots linebacker and fine pass rusher, you could do that if you want, but it's kind of a stretch. Jim, you could say the same thing about Atlanta for any geographical region in this nation. It's just not a sports town that elicits an emotional response from anybody. It's tough to hate Atlanta. There are so many cities that are easy to poke fun at and have fun at their fans' expense. Atlanta's not one of them because so few people who live there actually grew up there. Throw in the fact that the Falcons are not even the number one team in the state of Georgia. That would be the Bulldogs.
Yeah.
It's hard to really develop a good dose of venom for these Atlanta Falcons.
Maybe the Braves in the late 80s, early 90s, but even when they were winning, you didn't really wish them ill. You didn't look at the Atlanta Braves and say, oh, I guess I hope they lose the World Series because you don't really care.
Yeah, I don't remember the Braves having a whole lot of dislikable players. I remember their pitching staff being something that everybody marveled at. You've got several Hall of Famers who worked for that organization, including a former Cub in Greg Maddux. And if I recall it correctly, and I think I do, most Cubs fans were more angry at the organization for letting Maddux get away than they were Maddux for making the decision to depart. So, yeah, it's a difficult city. It's a difficult team to hate. But, I don't know, maybe somebody will work up some juice tomorrow morning. Maybe Mad Mac will have a reason to dislike the Falcons, and he'll call in. Maybe Dan Quinn, the head coach, supports Planned Parenthood, so that might get McInerney a little upset.
Mike McInerney, the pride of Bishop Knoll, actually the same age as Dan McNeil, so that's actually one Irish guy making fun of another Irish guy there. But, I mentioned it to Ryan here. I go, hey, Danny Mac's going to fill in for me on Friday. I'm doing a show, and this works out great. And he looks at me, and he's like, you're going to let a Highland guy come on?
Yeah, that's kind of unusual for a Mustang.
It is.
You're feeling very charitable this month, aren't you?
And then I didn't even really think about it, and I'm like, wow, you're right. Because, even growing up, I think Danny Mac graduated in 79. I graduated in 80. Pretty heavy rivalry, even still, but not as big, between Munster and Highland. And I've lived in Griffith for a long time. I've lived in Munster, and I've lived in Hammond, and I've never lived in Highland. And as many sponsors as we have and how much time I spend there, I still, at a guttural level, have this kind of general dislike when I meet a guy from Highland. He might be the greatest guy in the world. You know what I mean? It just comes out.
I don't understand that because even when we were in high school in the 70s, it wasn't much of a rivalry. We called it a rivalry, but that's like saying the Hammer and the Nail have a rivalry because Munster killed Highland for a number of years. Highland didn't win a football game against Munster until the fall of 1978. So while it was billed as the Battle of the Bridge and it was supposed to be this great rivalry, It's really difficult to say that it was because Highland has never been able to compete consistently against Munster. Well, Highland people, we may hate the Mustangs, but we can't say we have a rivalry. That's like the Nail standing up and saying, "Aha, Hammer, look at you, we have a rivalry." And the Hammer says, "No, you don't," and just hits it a few more times.
That situation has accelerated. By the way, you want to talk to Danny Mac, 219-845-1100. He's going to be sitting here all day tomorrow for me in the morning for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I will not be here. But your Highland Trojans in terms of football or even basketball, and so maybe not so much in baseball with the longtime coach there, but really the athletics have been overshadowed by Griffith, by Munster, by Lake Central, even some Hammond teams and so forth. Just haven't had that success over the last few years. How's that make you feel?
Yeah, well, my kids are all finished with the school system there, so it's not something I spend a lot of time gnashing teeth over. It's been that way for a long time. Since Highland had some administrative changes, and it's been well over a decade now, when Judy DeMuth, who was our assistant superintendent, packed up and left, when Brad Smith, the football coach, decided he'd had enough, and it was all because of a very overzealous school board that was trying to put pressure, and they caved to the pressure, and it's been downhill ever since. It bothers me, but it's not the kind of thing that keeps me up at night, Jim.
Danny Mac, how many years in sportscasting in Chicago?
Oh, boy. Almost 31, I think. 1985 is when it all started, so this would be beginning my 32nd year.
Where did it start?
Started at my college radio station at Ball State, the Ball State University, the Harvard of Delaware County, Indiana. Thank you very kindly. And from there, I went to WGN Radio in 85 and was lucky enough to be there at a time when they had just reacquired the Bears rights. And some people might remember that Bears team from 1985 being pretty worthwhile of coverage. And it was exciting. I wrote for the Times between 87 88, and then started working at the old AM/FM loop in the winter of 1988. And when The Score was born in 1992, I was the afternoon show co-host and worked there for 9 years before going to ESPN, and then back to The Score, and then over to The Drive, and right now I'm an unrestricted free agent.
How's that feel?
Great. It really does. It's unnerving, but it's also very, very exciting.
It's not to the point where the wife's like, "You're still here?" in the morning.
I think Sherry has had it with my domestic chores, and boy, am I on top of it. We had one heck of a meal last night, so that's what.
So you're cooking too?
Oh yeah, I shop, I cook, I clean, I bring the garbage cans in every Friday morning after they come by. I do it all.
Danny Mac's going to sit for me tomorrow, and I very much appreciate that, guys. Tomorrow, I'm actually starting a show with the editor of the Times, Bob Heiss, and that's going to be in the afternoon, so I'm going to need some time to get ready for that. It's going to be a live show on Facebook only, and that'll go off around 2 or 2:15. Got any questions for Danny Mac? 821-845-1100, 26 swim. Some guy wants to talk about Highland swimming Munster swimming out of the 70s and 80s. Everybody knows they just won the state championship all the time.
Yeah, they were so big. They didn't even call themselves Mustangs. They were the Munster Seahorses,
yes,
as I recall.
They were seahorses. So let's go back on your past. Are you going in 85 and you go into WJGN? And the Super Bowl is actually early in 86. Mm-hmm. So you come on, you probably don't realize it at the time, but I would say the most legendary football team ever to come out of Chicago is 1985. That's your first job. What do you think? It's always going to be like this?
Yeah,
or what?
It doesn't get much better than that, does it? I mean, Kevin Butler was considered was voted the Rookie of the Year in the NFC that year. Man, I had a heck of a rookie season myself. You're right. It doesn't get much better than that, but we got the benefit, even though they never got back to another Super Bowl with that regime. We still had a residual benefit of how magnetic that football team was. They were the Rolling Stones in shoulder pads. If you were just anywhere near Chicagoland in the mid to late 80s, you could not get out of the line of fire of Bears coverage. And everybody craved it because they had so many colorful personalities on that team. Jim McMahon, Steve McMichael, Ditka, The Fridge, Richard Dent, Dan Hampton. You can go on and on how interesting that football team was. Unfortunately, they won only one Super Bowl.
You could argue that a similar phenomena happened here in the fall of 2016. In other words, for those younger folks or who moved into the area, you wouldn't know the craze that was going on around the Bears from maybe 84 to 88, 89 when Ditka left. And then the same sort of craze kind of got repeated along Waveland and Sheffield in the fall of this year. It's a similar phenomenon. Would you agree?
Was there something happening?
I'll stop, will you?
I
knew
on
we
the
were
north
going
side
there,
in the fall.
It was huge. I mean, it was. You know what? As a matter of fact, the Cubs thing might have been bigger than the '85 Bears.
Well, it's bigger, Jim, in terms of the media coverage. There was no Twitter in 1985. There wasn't even an internet. People weren't getting their information as easily as they do today. So while everybody was covering it, it just wasn't as available in as many forms as it is now. I don't think there's any question this 2016 Cubs team that just won a World Series was as big locally as the Bears were. No question about it. And like those Bears teams of the mid to late 80s, seemingly likable guys. Take away the closer, Aroldis Chapman, who was only here as a short term, and everybody knew he was just going to be a rental player. I think most people feel the Cubs are pretty likable.
What do you think of Joe Madden?
I think he's terrific. I think it's great the Cubs won a World Series despite his mistakes. If Joe Madden would admit to the errors of his way, I would be willing to kiss his ring like everybody else has done since early November. The mistake he made in Game 6 with a 5-run lead, bringing in his closer and overworking him, I thought the following night when the Indians tied the game, I thought we are going to see a brand new chapter written in why the Cubs never win a championship. We saw in '69, and you and I are old enough to remember that, a black cat in the on-deck circle at Shea Stadium right behind Ron Santo. We saw the '84 team blow a 2-0 lead against the Padres. All they had to do was win one game out there in the era when there were only 2 teams in each league competing for a right to go to the World Series. They blew a 2-0 lead. We saw the '89 team not be able to do anything offensively against the Giants. '98, they couldn't get a bunt down against the Atlanta Braves. And, of course, I think most people remember all the zany activities that took place in 03 when they were 5 outs away, when a fan had something to do with them not getting forward. Then the shortstop lets a ball go between his legs. You've had a goat that cost this team a World Series championship, some believe. You've never had a manager cost a team a World Series, and here I thought they were so close to that, but I'm glad they got off the hook, and I'm glad they won the ball game because a lot of people would have been jumping off buildings around here.
You know, I'm with you, and that is a point in Chicago sports history that I think will be forgotten. But when they went to that 17-minute rain delay, Alexis and I went with Edo. Remember Edo?
Oh, sure.
Edo's Lounge.
Oh, yeah.
You were a big Edo's guy.
Yeah, I knocked out a few beverages there that day.
We went and watched a couple games, and I actually had to take Edo outside at one point. Go, Edo, here, I'm watching the game here, and every time it started to go against the Cubs, he'd come up to me and he'd go, hey, it's that old Cubs feeling. They're going to blow it. It's that old Cubs feeling. They're going to blow it. And I'm like, you know what? They're not going to blow this, Edo. The only way they could win is through a miracle. And it has to be drama, and you're going to have to go through hell. They may win it, they may not, but either way, it's going to go. It's just going to put you through hell, Edo. He said, well, it's that old Cubs feeling. We always blow it.
Sure.
03, 84, 69.
Yeah.
I was there. I watched the Black Cat on television with Jack Brickhouse describing it. And over and over. And then all of a sudden, the world changed. To me, that was the biggest turning point, almost the biggest surprise in Chicago sports history. I was too. I went upstairs and I listened to it. Told my wife, I'm like, I can't watch this. This is too much stress. I'd like to listen. I want to see what Foley has to say. And then, boom, I went up and listened to it, and they won it. Were you? You had to see the surprise there.
Yeah, I thought once the game was tied, I thought, here we go again. And Edo's reaction was I think representative of how so many Cubs fans felt. Here we go again. That's exactly that's an institutionalized Cubs fan, as my wife Sherry likes to say. And why would you not feel that way? When they went into the postseason, before the first ball was thrown in anger, I said to a friend of mine who lives and dies with this team, I said, which team do you fear the most along the way? And he said, the Cubs. I fear my team becoming the Cubs, the same Cubs that have failed to capture the brass ring for more than a century. I thought that was a great answer.
I know you're not emotionally invested into the Cubs like many of the people listening right now, but we're talking about this, and I remember sitting in the upper deck of Jack Murphy Stadium in 1984. I went to college out there, and getting all lit up with Bill Howarth. Remember him, the quarterback from Munster? He and I, loud, obnoxious, yelling at people, making fun of their brown hats and all that stuff. And the Cubs were winning. And I was so far gone, I can't remember which game it was. It might have been the fifth game. It might have been the third game. I can't remember. But I just remember all the San Diego Padres fans filing out past us. And Howarth and I all hung over already, in the most amount of despair that two drunken guys from the Midwest could have in California. It was an emotional down point that I don't even know if I've ever talked about it until this moment. But it seems like it was all made good.
Yeah, I think it's good for you to get it out. I think that's what therapy is all about, and really talk radio is for.
Why do you do radio, Dan?
Because I don't have any skills. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do if I weren't doing this. I suppose I'd be writing, but it's what I've always wanted to do. People say, how'd you get into this? Why did you? When I was 8 years old, I used to turn the sound down on the television and do play-by-play of Blackhawks games into a little cassette recorder and then sit and evaluate my performance afterward. I did that for a number of years. When Ken Holtzman pitched his first no-hitter with the Cubs, I was home that day with an abscess tooth that had been removed. I started scoring the game in the fourth inning because I thought, he's looking pretty good here. His stuff is outstanding. Maybe we're looking at something special. So I did a homemade scorecard, and after the game, when he pitched the no-hitter, I went to my mother's bedroom and grabbed her Smith Corona typewriter out of the corner of the closet and wrote a game story and made up quotes as though this is what manager Leo DeRocher said. This is what Billy Williams said about his catch in the well that kept Hank Aaron from breaking up the no-hitter. So, that's what I've always wanted to do. And fortunately, there has to be a lot of luck along the way. I'm not going to deny that. You have to get some breaks. And fortunately, I've had enough good people who have been in my path who've been able to, facilitate some of those good chances for me.
When you're doing radio, do you feel like you're working?
No. I feel like I'm working up until the point the light comes on. And then once the light comes on, it's all recreation. It's kind of odd how it works that way. The prep part of it is working. And some people say, oh, really? Watching games is working? Well, it's just the time commitment. It's not breaking rocks. No, there are a lot of people who work physically a lot harder. But once the light comes on, it's just playtime.
You mean you prep?
A little bit. Some people think you just roll out the headsets and just sort of have a recreational exercise. It's a little tougher than that, actually.
Isn't it? But really, that's how it's supposed to sound. You're supposed to show up to biology class, and you're supposed to get a B+ on it. And you're supposed to act like you don't even come in with a book, and you're just supposed to act like, wow, man, this is just part of life. And you might even act like you didn't study at all. And then you're supposed to take the test and be the cool guy. Yeah. To me, it's kind of like that with radio. Yeah. People don't realize that last night I stayed up about 4 hours watching all the news, watching our LCEC game. I had Dan Bedoy send me all the wrestling stuff, and I looked at it last night. I don't necessarily like to admit that. I never admit that on the radio, that I'm doing a lot of prep. But the only way that you can sound like it's easy is to have gone through all the hard stuff already.
Right.
I try to tell these guys that too.
Yeah, that's when the fruit of your labor is recognized. That's when the wine actually gets made. This is when you're actually on the air. That's the fun part of it.
It's not always fun taking this guy on the air, but once in a while it can be. He's of the 1979 class of Bishop Knoll Institute, and that's Mad Mac on line one. How you doing?
Getting on here with the comedian Jed saying he preps for a show. That's like saying he prepped after he walked out of the bowling alley and then drove right to the studio, and he did it on the way. Come on, brother. There's no prep out of Jimmy D'Lo. But Danny Mac, we know that professional preps up a little, right, Daniel?
Hey, what's going on, Mad Mac?
Good, man. How are you doing, brother? Glad to hear
Outstanding.
you on the local airwaves.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be here. It's a
It's
long
good
way
to
from
hear
Old
that.
Cott Avenue.
Oh, definitely a long way. A long way from Ball State and the booming metropolis of Muncie down there where you used to ply your wares. But like I said, when I heard you were going to be on Friday morning, I thought, this is one show we got to wake up early for.
What do you mean you don't wake up early every day, dude? What's up with that?
Well, I wake up every early, but I mean, it depends on what's going on yours. But we're almost always listening to Jimmy, too, because he's professional, like the word professional has never been used before, right, Jimmy?
Man, Mac, you go to Ball State?
I went there for 1 year because of a little money issue at the infamous St. Joe's College, which apparently has way bigger money problems, which only probably you and Danny Mac can bail them out of.
Yeah, what about that, man? You went there. That's right. I mean, they're $100 million in debt. How does that happen without anybody knowing?
Well, I think they use the Munster School Program financial aid guide on how to run an institution.
Listen to him. He never lets up. You are relentless, Mac.
What kind of donuts you want tomorrow, Danny? I'm buying.
You know what? My commitment to excellence won't allow a donut unless you have one in a whole grain variety.
You're in, brother. I'll see you tomorrow morning, buddy.
All right, there it is. Danny Mac will be in here for me tomorrow. Hey, man, I really
Ryan, have
appreciate it.
security here early. If Mad Mac's in the neighborhood, I want a Hammond cop nearby.
He came here when Trump was, I think, the last week of the election in November.
Uh-huh.
And he rode, and I didn't make a big deal about it because it was just so distracting. He was riding his bike back and forth here dozens and dozens of times with a hockey stick in one hand.
And himself in the other?
Pretty much. And a Trump flag coming off the hockey stick. And it was bothering the crap out of me because he was doing it back and forth, and you could see it on the video, but he was doing it no-handed. And I don't care who it is. You watch a guy ride a bike no-handed, and you know because you've wiped out on your bike on Strong Street, going down Strong Street, and you hit a bump, and you go over the top, back and forth, no-handed. And that I just get a little verklempt at the whole idea.
Right. At some point, that's going to go badly.
Exactly.
At some point. May not be this time, but at some point, you're going to pay for that one.
All right, man. Thanks for sitting in tomorrow.
You bet. My pleasure. We will have my buddy Vandy's going to come in and ride sidecar with me. We will have Cherville resident John Yurkovich, a man who was one game away from playing in a Super Bowl back in 1996 when he was a member of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's going to join us tomorrow to talk a little football, and I'm hopeful that we'll have two-time NFL Coach of the Year, Ron Rivera, joining us tomorrow. A year ago at this time, he was back home in Northern California getting ready for his Carolina Panthers to take on the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl. He's been watching the entire playoffs from his armchair like the rest of us this year, so I want to get him on board and see how that feels.
He's also, of course, Ron Rivera, a proud graduate of the University of California at Berkeley. I'm sure he's watching the stuff just like I am. You know, Ron Rivera and I both got sociology degrees at the same time, and we were in some of the same classes.
At Cal?
At Cal. He won't remember me. I remember talking to him a few times because we would talk football, and then I would always bring up the Bears because, I'm the only kid from Chicago in any of these classes. But I got to tell you this, even at that time, I'm just like a jamoke. I'm on the boxing team, and I'm not, one of the big guys on campus. He certainly was at that time. He was the nicest guy.
He always
when
has
when it's like nobody's looking and it doesn't matter, and you can be a jag or you can be a really good guy. He impressed me then, and he impressed every way he handles is done with class.
No question. He's a sincere guy when he does charity work. He doesn't do it for cameras, and he does it almost any time he's asked. Ron has always been one of my favorite guys I've met, and God bless you for studying sociology. That would have been Dr. Harry Edwards at
Yes.
Cal.
How do you remember that?
Because I am a sociology minor.
Oh,
and
really?
I know all things about one of the greatest academic disciplines ever because that's what we called a cume builder. You want to get your grades up? Take a ton of sociology classes.
As a matter of fact, if there was any one thing besides being in speech and debate at Munster that I did to prepare for radio, it was sociology because everything is just like groups fighting with each other and how do they get to that point? You don't realize how much it goes into. But Harry Edwards, just so everybody knows, was it the '68 Olympics or he was an African American
Civil rights
activist. And I had, as a sociology guy, he was a sociology professor. I had him a number of times. He taught the best college course I took by far. It was called The Sociology of Sport. And he was just like Rivera. I think Rivera was in that class. And Harry Edwards would be very controversial. And then when, I think it was in the 90s, the NFL needed someone to help with race relations, they hired Harry Edwards.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
He's one of the godfathers of the craft.
Oh, ask Rivera if
Harry
you get him
Edwards,
on about Harry.
Margaret Mead. We'll talk about all of them tomorrow. No, we won't.
Just Harry
that
Edwards.
concludes our Harry Edwards discussion for the week.
He's Danny Mac. You'll hear him tomorrow. He's got to get up early. He'll be here at 5:30. I won't. I'll be on tomorrow at 2 o'clock on Facebook Live with NWI Live with Times editor Bob Heiss. We've got basketball tonight, and that is from Griffith, Munster Griffith, and that is boys basketball. And
What's the spread in that one?
I would say Griffith's got to be
Griffith's
favored
got to
by
be about an 8.5 point, 9 point favorite. Yeah, I would think so.
I'll give it 12.
All right. Well, I'll take the 12.
Let's bet on high school sports on the FCC regulated airways.
I'm going to get to the point guard this afternoon and see if we can't work a deal.
Great. There we go. I'm not listening in the morning because I want to keep my heart at a regular rate. Hey, listen, tonight it is Munster and Griffith, and then it is high school basketball all weekend long in terms of girls sectionals. You have a real dandy on Friday night, and that'll be Gary Westside and Lake Central. Of course, that'll also be on Facebook Live. And then we are going to be at Griffith girls sectional. So it's not just the Lowell 4A sectional. We'll be all over the place. Check out WJOB1230.com for the complete schedule on all that. Thanks a lot, Danny.
You bet.
All right, City of Whiting up.